Why hello there, and welcome back to Tabletop Ferox Spooky Edition. All Flesh Must Be Eaten was released in 1999 by Eden Studios, placing it right at the beginning of the 2000s zombie boom, which, for those who do not remember, was this weird point in history where zombies just became this massively popular pop culture phenomenon for unknown reasons. And as you may have guessed, this is a zombie survival horror role-playing game. Specifically, it is the first fully zombie-themed role-playing game, which is one of those things that doesn't sound that noteworthy until you consider, prior to 1999, 0 zombie role-playing games. After 1999, quite a few. And on the surface, creating such a narrowly focused game might seem a little odd. I mean, at the time, there were plenty of horror and non-horror games that were more than capable of handling a zombie survival adventure. But while the narrow focus restricts them to only really covering one thing, that then allows them to cover that one thing very completely. It is also, personally, the most fun that I've had running a game, so I guess let's take a look at this and see if it holds up. Characters in this zombie survival horror role-playing game are, as you might expect, survivors in some sort of zombie horror scenario. So I guess, let's make us a survivor. Characters are defined as either norms, survivors, or inspired, which determines how many points are given to spend on the various things. To give a thematically appropriate example, the characters from Night of the Living Dead are norms. They are just average folks who got caught up in a little zombie situation. Whereas the characters in Day of the Dead are survivors. They have specialized skills, training, and experience that gives them an advantage in a prolonged zombie survival scenario. Inspired have magic. I can't think of an example for that one, which is weird considering just how many zombie movies I've seen. Or maybe it's just weird that there even is a magic user / cleric character type in this game. Anyway, let's just say this character is a norm, an average person who suddenly finds themselves walking amongst the dead. Which gives us 14 attribute points, 5 quality points, and 30 skill points. Also, no metaphysics points, as those are exclusively for inspired characters. Characters have 6 primary attributes: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, perception, and willpower. And we can distribute our 14 points among those however we please, with 6 being the human maximum and 2 being the human average. So let's just put 2 points in each, since that's average, and then our 2 remaining points in dexterity and perception. Then we have secondary attributes. Life points, which are equal to constitution plus strength times 4 plus 10, endurance points, which are equal to constitution, strength, and willpower times 3 plus 5, speed, which is equal to constitution plus dexterity times 2, and that is speed in miles per hour, which is not incredibly useful, but then also that divided by 2 is speeds in yards per second, which is slightly more useful, but since that's like maximum speed and a round is defined as, quote, about 1 to 5 seconds, it's not an incredibly useful measurement. And finally, Essence Pool, which is equal to the sum of all of our primary attributes, and is primarily used for the magic abilities of inspired characters, but can affect uninspired characters as well. Next we have qualities and drawbacks. We get 5 points for those, so let's take fast reaction time for 2 points, which allows us to always act first, within reason, and also gives a bonus on fear checks. Then 2 points each in attractiveness and charisma, which add their bonuses to tests where being attractive or charismatic, respectively, would provide a benefit. We can also take drawbacks to gain additional quality points up to a maximum of 10, and since we are currently at -1 points, let's take the honorable drawback, which gives us 1 additional point, and basically means that we just kinda can't be a total dick. We get 30 points to spend on skills, the first 5 points in each skill costing 1 point, with everything past 5 costing 3. Some skills have types, which basically means that the listed skill reflects a whole set of skills that must be taken individually. So, for example, the gun skill must be taken with a type, so putting 3 points into guns shotgun gives us a +3 bonus with shotguns, but only shotguns. If we wanted skill in handguns, we would need to buy that as a separate skill. Skills can also have specialties, which provide a +2 bonus for 1 point, but only in a specific situation. So a +4 in the notice skill costs 4 points, but then for 1 extra point we could take a specialty in listen, which would increase that bonus to +6 when using the notice skill for listening. Alright, so let's spend the rest of those skill points. And finally, equipment is a little complicated. Or not, depending on the situation. Basically, characters have access to all of the things that an average person of their resource level might have. Of course, in general, people do not carry everything they own around with them at all times. So, what a character can and cannot start the game with is going to be very situational based on when and where the game starts, as the types of item that a character might have access to are going to vary wildly depending on if they are at home, at the office, out camping, or at the mall. So I suppose this character is done. And there we have it, an overall fairly simple character creation process. I am a strong believer that the more likely your character is to die, the more simple character creation should be. And while there is a bit of pushing numbers around with all of the attribute and quality and skill points, it does still feel appropriate relative to the amount of use you are likely to get out of your character. Like, it is a survival horror game, so survival is the goal, and if you, do well in the game, you will survive and not have to make a new character. But that does, of course, also mean that the game is designed to make you work for survival. But if you die, making a new character is not terribly inconvenient. Although I do have one complaint, and that is, while the options provided do feel thematically appropriate for this game, they do also feel a little limited and kind of generic, especially in the qualities and drawbacks, which are supposed to be the thing that, lets you add a little bit of uniqueness to your character, but it kind of comes across feeling more like, alright, I have these points and I need to spend them on something. So a 3 out of 6 for character creation. Overall, it is appropriate for the themes and level of the game. However, things can end up feeling a little generic, largely due to reasons that I will be discussing later. All Flesh Must Be Eaten uses the Unisystem system, as do most games from Eden Studios, which is a D10 based system, and essentially you roll a D10, add modifiers, and if the result is 9 or higher, you succeed. Obviously, from there it does get a bit more complicated, so let's just say that our character is scanning the woods looking for the thing they thought they saw moving in the darkness. We roll a d10, then add +3 for perception and +4 for notice. However, it is also dark, we are surveying a wide area, and don't even really know what we're looking for, so let's say all of that makes it a very difficult task, which adds a -3 penalty to the roll. So our final result is 10, which, looking on the outcome table, is an adequate success. So we definitely see something moving out there, but can't be sure exactly what it is. Probably just a deer. But, let's just say that it is not a deer. Upon encountering a zombie or other sufficiently spooky stimuli, characters may be required to make a fear test, rolling a d10 and adding their willpower, and in this case the +1 bonus from our character's fast reaction time quality. And we do pass, but if we hadn't, the result would be the loss of essence points, see, I said they were for something, and some other penalties. And since being attacked by a thing you've been actively looking for safely falls within the realm of reasonable situations for our fast reaction time quality, we can act first without having to check initiative. And let's just say that for whatever reason we do happen to have a shotgun, which we fire at the zombie, rolling a d10 and adding dexterity and guns shotgun. Also a +1 for point blank range and another +1 for using buckshot. And our final result is 13. A 3rd level success, although that doesn't really matter right now. And the zombie probably isn't smart enough to try and dodge the attack, so success means a hit, and a shotgun firing buckshot deals 1d8 times 6 damage, with the point blank range increasing the modifier by 1 for a total of 21 damage, which is then deducted from the zombie's dead points. Get it? Because they're dead, so they have dead points instead of life points. It's a little funny. And for a living person, that would be a very serious injury, but zombies can keep going even with a gaping hole in their chest. And the zombie does keep going, clawing at our character, rolling 1d10, adding dexterity and brawling. And since we are probably smarter than a zombie, we can roll to dodge, adding dexterity and dodge. And both rolls are successful, but the zombie succeeded more, so the attack hits, dealing 1d6 times the zombie's strength damage, which is deducted from our character's life points because they are alive and have life points. Then it is our turn again, so another shotgun blast and a 10, which means we get to roll again, then subtract 5, and if the result is positive, add that to the roll. So our total is 20, and looking at the outcome table, that is a 5th level success, which adds +2 to the damage total before multiplying, for a total of 56 damage. And that is significantly more than enough to make the zombie once again just regular dead. And that is basically the rules that you are likely to need to know, and overall it is a system I like, but also one whose complexity is basically at the limit of what I am willing to deal with for a non-dragon game. And mind you, I'm not saying that the dragon game is appropriately complicated, just that you can't really say, I refuse to interact with the dragon game. There are a moderate amount of rules, but that is to provide a moderate amount of tools for the game master to use and potentially lead to greater freedom in gameplay. Also, the focus on survival horror does make it a bit easier to run than some other games because the experience that it provides is a lot more similar to your standard hack and slash dungeon experience, which does make it a fairly accessible horror game when compared to something like Call of Cthulhu or Slasher Flick, both of which are very good games in their own right, but do have some elements which can seem counterintuitive to someone who's more familiar with a classic dungeon crawl experience. Honestly, the only real issue for me personally is those bonuses can stack up pretty quickly. Like, from our example, a +3 in perception and a +4 in notice are above average, but only by 1 point each. And that bumps us up to an 80% chance of success, or, basic success. And that is why the difficulty modifiers and degrees of success are so important in this game. They are a thing that you really need to use in order to keep everything balanced and running smoothly. Also, the damage system can seem a little weird, like, why am I rolling a d8 and multiplying it by 6 when I could be rolling 6d8? Because that sounds way more fun. And the book does address this, stating that it is to maintain the even likeliness of low, mid, and high rolls versus the curve that you get with multiple dice. Of course, if you would prefer to determine damage by rolling a handful of dice, you can. There's actually nothing preventing you from changing that or any other of the rules in this or any other game. That is specifically for game masters. Players are not allowed to change the rules without the game master's permission. So a 4 out of 6 for mechanics, it is a complete but open-ended system. It provides you with a lot of tools, but not that many things that say, this is exactly what you do in this situation. So applying the rules is going to require some degree of thought and judgment. Zombie media is incredibly varied, not only in the types of scenarios and stories that can be told, but also in the specifics of what is a zombie, and what can they do, what can harm them, etc. And that is where All Flesh Must Be Eaten really delivers. It is basically a monster fighting game that only has one monster: zombies. And to build an entire game around zombies, they obviously had to put a little bit of work into that. So to facilitate that, they include an entire zombie creation system, which allows you to create whatever types of zombies your twisted little heart can come up with, or, copy ones from one of your favorite movies. Or Zombie Lake. There are a lot of options provided, but obviously they can't cover every imaginable zombie variation that you might think of. So you are going to be able to make your Night of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead, Tombs of the Blind Dead, Zombie Lake. But if you were to try to do something a bit more esoteric, like the child zombies from The Children, who kill with radioactive hugs and can only be stopped by cutting off their hands, that would require some moderate house ruling. Now, as for the setting, this book actually provides 11 different settings, or dead worlds as they would come to be known. So they give you your basic Night of the Living Dead type scenario that everyone is familiar with, but then also a really wide variety ranging from 11th century to post-apocalypse and, not everything in between, but, World War II, and there's one where there are zombies and aliens, just a bunch of different interpretations of the same idea. Each setting is detailed reasonably well, considering that there are 11 of them, with the whole backstory and story ideas, and of course the zombies and other baddies appropriate for that setting. As I keep saying, it is a game that serves one thing, but serves it in as many ways as possible. However, options are also a thing that I have a problem with in another area. As I have presumably mentioned before, I am not a huge fan of alternative core rules. Like, some alternate rules are fine, they give you little options for your game, but when you have alternate core rules, it can feel like the designer couldn't make up their mind or just lacked confidence in the basic rules. And this game has an alternate card-based system, an alternate diceless system, an alternate critical and fumble system, just all of these alternate core rules that just kind of feel like they are there to be there, not because they actually add any value to the game. And the revised edition even contains a set of D20 modern conversion rules, which I think might actually be the only difference in the revised edition, because, there are still typos from the original edition. And honestly, I haven't really looked at those rules because it kind of feels like a half-hearted attempt to cash in on what was supposed to be the next big thing in gaming. And honestly, even if I liked D20 Modern, which I don't, I feel like I wouldn't really be that interested in a 20-page appendix crammed in the back of a book for another system. I would want a complete D20 Modern zombie game. And maybe those conversion rules are something to look at in a future video, but for now, +1 for content. They give you all of the stuff you need for the game, your weapons, your skills, your vehicles, but then also they go above and beyond in providing you more zombies than you could ever need, and rules for making even more than that. And +1 for setting, or rather, settings. Each setting isn't really that impressive, but there are 11 of them, each of which is more than sufficient as a jumping off point for your own zombie adventure, something that is particularly useful for someone who might not be as familiar with the genre, or just doesn't know what direction they'd like to take a game in. Overall, this book is written fine. It does suffer a little bit from the quasi-academic writing style that permeated the first few decades of tabletop role-playing games. My biggest complaint here is that they do this thing where they use feminine pronouns in the odd number chapters and masculine pronouns in the even number chapters, which is possibly the stupidest way to deal with that. The issue being that it doesn't actually do anything other than allowing you to announce that you recognize it's an issue, but also that you're unwilling to use a centuries-old colloquialism that might conflict with the magic writing laws, which you hopefully understand are only for academic writing. And then also this whole thing just creates an extra editing task, which has not been executed without error. And back to the actual writing, at times you can kind of forget that you're reading a survival horror game. Like, throughout the rules they use examples like sneaking into a private party or taking a relaxing flight to Europe. Things one generally does not do during a zombie outbreak scenario. And this is because very large sections of the character creation and rules chapters were just copied directly from C.J. Carella's Witchcraft, with the absolute minimum number of changes made. Like, the only things they really changed are the name of the game and the name of the game master. And actually the pronouns used in each chapter, because the character creation and rules chapters went from chapter 3 and 4 to chapters 2 and 3, which changed if they were odd or even. Like, the only new character options that are provided in the entire book are a resistance quality and a throwing skill. Also, the magic system is kind of incredibly lackluster. I didn't even mention it during character creation or mechanics, just because it is that unimpressive, and when viewed through this lens, definitely feels like it's a thing that is only in the game because it was in the set of rules that was edited into this game. And that is a big part of why I only gave a 3 out of 6 for character creation. It is almost entirely recycled content that has only been customized by removing things that were irrelevant from the other game without really adding anything. And another thing is, reading the rules section of a book is really boring. So you want to try to keep the themes and tone of the game going throughout the entire thing to keep the reader engaged. And that is a thing that is pretty much impossible when you are just reprinting text from a previous source. And yeah, this is one of those things where I'm probably being a little bit harder on them than I should, but I just kind of have to wonder why you would expect people to be willing to buy a book that you aren't even willing to write. The layout is overall well done in a thematically appropriate grungy style, very much of its time, although they definitely could have put a little more effort into readability. There's also a pretty good amount of art throughout, although the style of some of the art definitely does not let you forget that this book was published in 1999. However, I do have one complaint, and that is this weathered paper background that they use on the fluff text pages, which can make the text quite difficult to read. So, no adjustment for writing. I guess it was good enough to use twice, but even the stuff that was written for this game is, it's fine, but a little boring. And a 4 out of 6 for presentation. Maybe it's just nostalgia for the 2000s, but I like the stupid, edgy layout design and art. And that was All Flesh Must Be Eaten, a game that is not as good as I remember, but honestly that's my fault for remembering something fondly in the first place. It is still a good game though, and one that does justice to the zombie subgenre. It only does that one thing, but does it more thoroughly than any other game at the time, and very few games since. And even 20 some odd years after its release, it is still my recommendation for a zombie survival gaming experience. It has a very solid base, and then gives you lots of things to put on top of that, or the tools to create your own zombie gaming experience. Also, there are like way more supplements for this game than you might expect, which, given the narrow zombie focus, can get a little weird, but also provides you with even more zombie options for your zombing experience. And that is about it for All Flesh Must Be Eaten, so thank you for watching, with extra special thanks to my Fight and Flail Snails, Samuel Gorski, Randy Mulholland, and Toshiro Kuro. If you'd like to be cool like them, check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. You can still hit all of the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos that either myself or the cold, heartless YouTube algorithm have lovingly selected for you, and I am sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.